So we're going to look at the issue of how, as every kind of type of business that we work in, how can you actually drive value through being sustainable? Because I think, on the one hand, we all want to be sustainable, but what does that actually mean to our bottom lines, and what does it actually mean to our businesses in terms of the value that then what sustainability means, and what actually does value mean within that context? So to help us, help me even, Stephen Cronk at the far side from Mirabeau. We also have from Beyond Zero, Doug Wanstall, who's head of projects from Beyond Zero. We have Jose Barroso. Sorry, João. Sorry, I've got the wrong about. You'll always be Joe to me, Chief. Anyway, João Barroso, Director of Sustainability at the Wines of Alentejo Sustainability Programme, or WASP, which would be a lot easier to say. Thank you. And Robin Thompson, who's Head of Technical at Encirc. Can I deliberately there didn't actually explain who your businesses are. I mean, I guess Maison Mirabeau is a bit easier for other people to understand. But can I just ask you each just to very succinctly just sort of give an introduction to your own individual businesses, and what particular that you're doing around sustainability. I mean, I know you're probably doing a great deal, but if you could just give a kind of a top line on where you are on this journey. So perhaps Stephen, if I could start with you.
Saving energy, one microphone. Like it. I'm wearing two hats today. So Maison Mirabeau, we're a Provence wine brand. My wife and I left Twickenham 15 years ago to set it up, and we're still there, still married and still smiling most days. But also I wear a different hat, which is as the chairman of the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation. So really trying to promote regenerative farming in the world of wine.
Hi, Doug Wanstall from Beyond Zero. So I still identify as a farmer, and first thing this morning I was on the farm, but I actually spend most of my time now helping farmers and land managers in all sectors, from viticulture to orchards to wide-scale agriculture, to transition to regenerative and restorative practices.
Hi, I'm João. João Barroso. I'm an environmental engineer and I don't have a business. I work for the Regional Wine Growing Commission of Alentejo. So more than 10 years ago, more than a decade ago, Alentejo understood there was a need for look into sustainability in an integrated way as a region. Climate change is there. It's been there for quite a while now. And so indeed I was, it was a good idea to bring somebody outside of the industry to go in and to try to organize the sector in the region to basically not reinvent the wheel, but do what other regions are already doing in the world, particularly in the new world of wine, California, Australia, New Zealand, Chile, and indeed create a system for the region of Alentejo. And, more than a decade later, here we are.
Thanks, João. Good afternoon, everybody. Robin Thompson. I'm from Encirc Beverages. I guess likewise, foot in two camps in the sense of, so I work for the beverage division of Encirc, but Encirc, I guess, based on the intro so far, predominantly we'll talk about the glass manufacturing aspect of our business as well. So we're a major manufacturer of glass bottles for the wine and spirits industries, with also a major bottling operation based in the UK to really pick up on your point, Richard, about taking the advantage of bringing wine over in bulk and other liquids as well. So.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, I mean, it's quite a hard topic in a way, the word value, because obviously value can mean a myriad of different things. Can I ask you, Doug? I mean, you work across different industries, don't you? Different sectors. So obviously today you got your wine hat on, but I mean, I guess tomorrow you could be talking to a FMCG business, or it could be, I don't know, aviation or whatever it might be. I mean, when you're working with companies who are starting their sustainability kind of journey, as it were, is that word value, is that relevant? I mean, is that what that's top of the agenda, or that's what people are interested in, or do people kind of where do people understand that by that term?
Yeah, I think when we first get involved, people don't really know where they're headed, but we are about delivering value. So whether that's reducing emissions, or a combination rather, reducing emissions, increasing carbon removal into biomass, be it soils. So I feel like Jancis has stolen my thunder talking about soils, because that's my thing. But when we talk about land management, we are looking at the regenerative restorative process, the journey. It takes time. And what we're looking to do is to deliver time over a long time horizon. So we don't just flick a switch and become regenerative restorative overnight. Oh, by the way, I would ban the word sustainable. It's no longer good enough. I think we need to be doing a lot better than just sustaining our businesses. So we look at increasing and improving the soil life within the businesses that we help, and through that process of increasing soil life, we end up removing fertilizers and agrochemicals and everything else, because the plants are much more able to respond and be healthy and resist pathogens. And so we're delivering value in reducing costs in that main respect.
Okay, and in terms of when businesses are embarking on this, are they looking to sort of tick boxes, as in this is the kind of thing that we need to be doing, this is what we're sort of being told to do, or do you have to sort of sit there and say, well, what are the reasons why you as an individual business are doing this? Not because you may have been told to by the government or by your competitors. Is that?
Yeah, we're really good at picking our battles. We don't want to be working with people who are just ticking boxes. We want to work with people who are genuinely incentivized to reduce their emissions and do better. And we find that working with companies, it becomes infectious within a company that really cares, that once you start reducing emissions and increasing carbon removal into soils, into biomass, into habitats, it really does become infectious. And they want to, okay, how are we going to improve on this next year?
Yeah, because it is interesting. I mean, as a journalist, I talk to producers all the time, and it is, and companies, and it is very noticeable when someone says we want to be sustainable. It's kind of the same way they might say, we want to have a good staff culture, we want to have, employ the best people, or we want to have like the most quality wine, or the best customer service. And when you actually sort of start asking them what they're doing around sustainability, the conversation can quite quickly grind to a halt. So I think there's that issue, I think, within the industry about using the word sustainability. I take your point. I think actually in a way being a bit more specific about what you mean, then in a way addresses it a little bit more. I mean, coming to you, Stephen, obviously you mentioned you got both your hats. You got your brand side, you got the wine production side. I mean, from a Mirabeau point of view, or Mirabeau, sorry. I'm having a good day. I know, yeah. What steps are you taking? Because obviously I know you're working with growers, aren't you, or producers? And what steps are you taking within the business to be more sustainable and regenerative?
So, I started business as a negotiant, so we're working with growers from across the whole region. We bought a farm 5 years ago and realised suddenly all the dilemmas facing farmers. And the question around value is whether or not farmers are really valuing the environment and nature. And I think we know that they actually do, but oftentimes the cost pressures mean that they are unfortunately not valuing in the way that they should do. So how do we cost in the environmental consequence of what we're doing? And I think that's something that regenerative really does address, thank goodness. And ironically, we were talking about it earlier, I think one of the guys who's helped raise awareness about farming and challenges around farming in the UK, and also now raising awareness about that word regenerative, is Mr. Petrolhead himself, Jeremy Clarkson. But actually, bravo to him, because he's got that word out there into the public consciousness, and I think it's going to become more and more the thing to do. But my story is when we bought the vineyard, we knew we would want to always farm organically, but our soils were so depleted and degraded that going organic wasn't going to fix the soils. And I think regenerative does give you a way to restore soils, to fix soils, bring back that life in the soil. And ironically, we talk about terroir in the world of wine. We should make sure that terroir is living. And as Jancis was saying, the difference between a conventionally, typically conventionally farmed soil versus a very healthy living soil is surely not only better for the wine, it's better for everything we consume. We're so used to measuring food, for example, by its calorific value. We should be measuring by its nutrient density. And I think, the healthy living soil helps contribute towards nutrient density. I think in the world of wine, there's some early trials coming out of California that actually shows it's better for the wine as well. So there's nothing not to like about it. So let's go the world thinking about it more and more. And there's no silver bullet. It's incredibly complex, as Jancis says. But the one thing that does help fix restore ecosystems, restore biodiversity loss. The World Wildlife Fund came out last week and said 73% of species have been made extinct by us humans in the last 50 years. Shame on us. There's lots that we do, so we need to start valuing the environment.
And we were just chatting outside. You just been to this Moa Hennessy event in Arles, haven't you? And it's very interesting. I remember when we first talked about you and the Regenerative Association. What was that? Was that before COVID or after COVID?
Just after COVID.
Yeah. It's such a short period of time, really, and it seems to have like really gathered pace from. Can you perhaps sort of surmise what happened at the Arles event in terms of like what you took out of that and the hopes for this becoming a bigger, for people like Moa Hennessy supporting it, takes it to another level, I suppose.
Yeah, well, they shipped over a lot of very clever boffins from around the world who helped enlighten us on the movement. A lot of beautiful people, obviously, from Hennessy as well. But it was an incredibly useful event. And one thing that's coming across, because this is the second one they've done, it's every 2 years. And the first one was all about soil. It's called the World Living Soils Forum. But now it's much more about the ability for soil and regenerative farming to also repair biodiversity loss as well. And so that nature element is coming above the ground as well as below the ground is a theme. And I met an incredible lady who's from the United Nations who's heading up one of the desertification sections of the UN, and she's got a lot of work to do. But she was telling me that the word regenerative is being formalized now and legally defined now. The UN's going to try and do it. In California, the California Department of Food and Agriculture is legally defining it. It's taken about a year. Australia are doing it with Charles Sturt University. They're starting to define the word regenerative so that people can start to apply for subsidies, so that governments and states know what it means, and we can really start to encourage farmers to transition. And that's the word. That's the biggest challenge. Is to wine schools, wine universities are not teaching regenerative farming. My generation of wine farmers in France, for example, were being taught at wine school 40 years ago that the purpose of the soil is to hold the vine vertical. But we've learned more about soil in the last 25 years than we have done in the last 2.5 centuries. So it's nobody's fault, but we can't unknow what we know now. So this the whole regenerative movement, I think, is an incredibly versatile package, and the closest thing we get to a silver bullet as far as that side of farming goes.
It's interesting, yeah, but it makes us all have to readdress how we talk about wine. I mean, even as a wine journalist, the kind of questions we're asking when we go and be a producer, it's not the pH level or the what's the alcohol level in your wine. It's talking about soils more. I mean, João, can I come to you in terms of what you're doing in Alentejo, because you're working with the producers there. Can you perhaps speak a bit more detail about what actually WASP is and how it's evolved and what your targets are?
Yeah, sure. First, I just wanted to go back a little for the word sustainability. I have to say I'm really sick of that word. I've been in this business of sustainability for more than a decade, actually almost 2, literally in sustainability, because I lived and studied in Sweden, and the Swedes and the Scandinavians have been on average a decade ahead of everybody else in that regard. And I also don't believe in sustainable products. In fact, that's why our logo it says sustainably produced, not sustainable wine or any other sustainable. Actually, the clothing company Patagonia says that the most sustainable shoes you can buy are the ones you already bought. And so I rather talk about prudence, really, than sustainability. Because if you know, the word prudence comes from the Latin prudentia, that literally means to see ahead. Somebody that's prudent is somebody that can see ahead, can understand their actions of today will have an impact on their life tomorrow. And so indeed, that's the way I try to pass on this message of sustainability to our producers. I really shiver every time a producer of ours says, "Oh, our sustainable wine." I said, "No, mate, it's not your sustainable wine. It's your sustainably produced wine. Don't say those things that way because they're not really true." And that's something that I find quite important. So back to your original question. Basically, what we did was we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. The wheel has been around for a while. And in fact, what we tried to create was this sense of belonging to a group. Because I often say that before this program, we came up with in Alentejo existed. Producers would meet in two different occasions, which would be in wine fairs, all fighting for the same consumer, and in shelves of supermarkets, all fighting for the same consumer. And with this program, they kind of exchange ideas. They create this community where they get together a couple of times a year to talk about best practices on specific issues, where they exchange their ideas, they share their problems, and the most important probably, they share their investments. They share what they did, how much did it cost, if there was a return on that investment, what it worked, what didn't work. And so that really created this kind of feeling of family, regional family, where we all are aiming for the same because we're all in the same boat. And it doesn't make sense if, this guy is doing regenerative, but this guy is just pulverizing with pesticides and then next to each other. And so, it's not going to be good for the overall big scheme of things. And so indeed, this strategy of communities, a strategy of knowledge sharing was in fact probably the most important part of the system. But then again, Jansen's actually, in her intervention, she delayed what could be a sustainability program for dummies. Ultimately, like a very simple first strategy is already aligned and noted by her, because indeed that's what it is. It's looking at the low-hanging fruits, as you say, understand what's the first things you can do to reduce quickly, understanding also that you have a return on your investment very visible, and then you start looking into the more soft components, the most complex aspects. That's another important aspect to it, which is sustainable. Actually, the French have a far better expression. They talk about development durable. So it's durable development. It's not sustainable, it's durable. What we want is to have a duration in our strategy, in our life, in our business or whatever. And so indeed, to look at it from this perspective, where you can understand, this is very complex. It's not just about changing bulbs. It's not just about controlling water. It's about the soil that you was talking about. It's about the people that are working with you and the people who don't work with you because you don't have people to work with you. And it's about the communities, and it's about the research investment, organization. So it's an extremely complex ecosystem that needs time also. These things don't happen just like that. Nature took literally billions of years to give us what we had in the last 10,000 years, which is the Holocene. And the terroir that we have comes from this Holocene. It's the perfect conditions to do what we do today. But we're now in the Anthropocene, right, where we are starting to, by the first time in human history, or rather in the planet's history, we are shaping the way nature is reacting. And so it's a very complex topic, and it's not, if you want to go into it, please be advised it's going to take a while to get there.
And do you get pushback from producers? Obviously, we read all the time, or we see it for ourselves, producers who are struggling and, going out of business and having to pull out fines. Obviously you hear lots of people saying they can't afford to be organic or they can't afford the certification. When you're talking to the producers, obviously, going back to this issue of value, how do you address that? If someone says, well, it sounds great. I'm not supporting the idea of it, but I can't physically afford to do it.
Well, I think that's actually a false question, because what you need to do first is you have to, organize your house. And when you organize your house, you start saving. When you optimize performance, you start saving again. And you save in materials, you save in money, you save in people, you save in time. You just save. So that's one way of looking at it. Obviously, you can always look at the other added value, which is the product in itself, and if you can have a competitive advantage in the market with your consumer. But come on, okay, fair enough. But if back there you already, decreased in, say, 40% your energy consumption, or in 80% your, pesticides, herbicides inputs, or in 50% your water consumptions, that's a lot there. And so indeed, that's one aspect to it. But then there's another aspect to it you can also use, which is resort to the initial, the champions, the ones that were doing it before it became a fashion or a need. So when you go to those, and if they're kind enough and generous enough to share their opinions, the others, the competitors, will go, wait a minute, this guy is not a consultant trying to sell me something. It's not a researcher trying to experiment something. It's that guy that I've been knowing for ages that's actually sharing with me how he did it, how he saved. So maybe it might work. Hey, can I go visit you next week? Or can we all as a group go and visit? Actually, and just very quickly, we had something happening with the wines of Great Britain a couple of years ago, where they contacted us and asked, look, we are going into the whites and sparkles. You guys in Alentejo are pretty much about reds. Do you mind if we go over and benchmark with you guys? And we said, yeah, sure, come over. So for a week, literally a bus full of English producers toured around Alentejo, visiting some producers who are actually here, taking notes, and then they were kind enough to send me this kind of A4 sheet with all the findings of best practices that they were going to take home. And, good on them that they wanted to come, and they did, and good on us that opened our house and shared with them. It's all about that ultimately to me. It's if you've done it, and if you share it, and if the others are committed enough and serious enough to really understand and get inspired, it's all done. We just don't do it. We just don't solve the problems you're talking about pretty much because of political will, because everything is there for the take.
Thank you, very good. Robin, can I come back to you and perhaps go back to the actual theme of the debate? I mean, as your business, Encirc, how, when you're working with your customers or your suppliers, I mean, how do you address the value issue in terms of following sustainable practices? Because obviously you're involved, I know you're making the glass, but you're also involved in bringing the wine in bulk, aren't you, over to the UK, then you're actually involved in packing it and then sending it to RDCs and to the customers, aren't you? So the whole supply chain issue, I suppose.
And it's a great question. And on a very simplistic level, we talk about value in the eyes of the customer. So let that be part of driving our business. So from a kind of a lean model perspective, but more recently gone beyond that in the sense of thinking that actually we need to be on the front foot and not just hearing and receiving those messages, but actually to start influencing those messages. And ultimately that culminated in just 2 weeks ago, not far from here, we held a conference for a day where we actually brought together our customers, their customers, so the retailers as well as our customers, our suppliers, and another influencers, etc. as well, into the room together for a whole day. We'd done the pre-work where we'd ask people what they saw as the challenges that they were facing in their particular bit, and then we used that as a workshop in the afternoon. And what's really exciting is, we then picked the top 3 kind of themes that came out of that, and have now committed to working with the people that contributed to that, customers, suppliers, etc., to then take it on to the next level. So in January, we're doing a follow-up session with a handful of those people to try and drive it further. That was really risky, and it was really something that had never been done before.
Can you say what those big 3 issues are?
Well, I can. I mean, the good news is that whilst none of them were sustainability or words to that effect, as it were, in themselves, that topic was actually, believe it or not, was number 4. But the reality was, all 3 were absolutely connected to the theme that we're talking about today. So, for example, getting more from less. So we're talking about lightweighting is the obvious thing, etc. We talked about how the consumer influences ultimately the package, ultimately how we operate as a business, both in terms of glass manufacturing, but also the packaging side of that as well, etc. And so you could pick through those top 3 themes and see right the way through the question around sustainability and the challenges around sustainability were threaded right the way through.
It's fascinating that you're doing that, because I think you are such the kind of the hub of the industry, aren't you? You're involved in all aspects of the supply chain.
And that was the point, really. That was really the thing that drove the idea in the first place, with the risks that came with it. And it's fair to say, you've got that kind of spectrum of the supply chain, as it were, through in one room. There were some challenges that go with that as well. But we see our place in this, and we talk about a 360 model, and that really is about us looking up and down the supply chain and seeing how can we support, how can we help ultimately our suppliers and our customers and their customers achieve the goals.
It's fascinating. I mean, in my previous life, I used to work in grocery retail, and I used to work in this magazine called Checkout, and they used to have, across Europe, there's a sort of efficiency consumer response, an ECR movement. You remember that from your days, I suppose, yeah? But it was, there were amazing conferences where you get the biggest retailers, the biggest brands, Coca-Cola, Unilever, and everyone was talking about this collaboration of how everyone worked together. But essentially it was all about driving efficiency. Yeah. I mean, but people weren't talking about sustainability in those days, but and I don't know whether, actually I don't even know that still goes on, does it? That ECR, or is that still not really?
Sacred.
Yeah, but it's interesting how those principles have now come back under the guise of.
I was going to say, the good news is it happened 2 weeks ago, and it was groundbreaking in that sense. So, yeah.
But anyway, from a value business point of view, I mean, I know we all get literally down in the soil and the nitty-gritty of it all, but from a business point of view, for the companies that are here, like importers and wine merchants and brand owners, it is essentially it's about driving efficiency, isn't it? I mean, it's about how you can collaborate and get efficiency.
Completely, yeah, and and the opportunities that exist through every stage of that, identifying those, as you talked about before, João, sharing that. It's not secretive. Let's not share. Let's not keep it hidden. Let's share some of the things that we're aware of, we're conscious of, we're exposed to. Let's share it with people, because quite often the answer is out there. People are willing to share it. So,
which is why it's great to have you today from you're from outside the industry, I suppose. I mean, is that efficiency angle, is that something which you could perhaps explore in terms of what you're doing with the customers that you work with and the sectors that you're in?
Yeah, for sure. So, I could use a particular example of, hope they don't mind me saying this, Denby's Vineyard in Surrey. So we work with those guys to work out their baseline. So where are they at today? What are their current emissions, and what are their current opportunities to reduce emissions and to increase carbon removal? And what we did was we've set them on a journey to continually improve that position. So continually improve their carbon reduction and to continually reduce their emissions. And what that's done is that's put them in a position where they are now at net zero. So their emissions are exceeded by their carbon removal, and they're able to use that position as a marketing advantage within their supply chain. That position is certified by the UK Carbon Code. And actually, most of the people in the room that are in the supply chain are really only interested in Scope 3 emissions. What they want is every producer, to be at net zero so that they can report up the chain that their Scope 3 emissions are dealt with. And that's really where the real value comes from our perspective.
Yeah, you mentioned about the idea of like selling carbon credits and that kind of stuff. I mean, is that? I mean, I know most people are a long way from that, but I mean, is that ultimately where the value comes, I suppose?
Well, yeah. Look, I mean, not many wine producers will want to sell carbon credits. They'll want to keep them for future use to protect themselves for growth. Because we work with a number of producers, and some are way off net zero because they're continually growing. They're continually adapting their businesses, and so they want to. And a company like Denby's will keep them for future growth, for future proofing. But other ways we're helping them reduce their costs. Denby's is another good example. What we see often is that grape mark is pushed up in a corner of a field somewhere and left there to decay over time. Actually all of that lovely material creates the most beautiful compost. We were there only a few weeks ago, and I couldn't help myself, being the farmer that I am, getting my hands in and smelling the compost that they created by chance. But we're now encouraging them to use that within their vineyard to reduce the inputs that they might otherwise buy, to increase the soil life that we know is so critical to reducing overall inputs.
Brilliant. So I'm aware I'm sitting on my back table here, but it's difficult for me to be able to see them and see you at the same time. Are there any questions, by the way, from the? I mean, excellent. Do you want to say who you're from and then?
Yeah, I'm John from the Wine Society. I had a question for Doug, actually. One of the things that we're trying to do is talk more and more to our suppliers about adopting more regenerative viticultural practices. The big pushback, as we all know, is cost. How do I get started? Show me the proof. I'm just thinking, I haven't seen so many examples in the wine world, but outside of wine and other agricultural sectors, have you seen lots of case studies where people have done regen trials on this, on this field versus conventional on this field, and they've actually kind of got the proof that over a number of years? We had a great talk by O'Neill's Vintners the other day, which had done this, but I haven't seen that many of those in wine.
Yeah, look,
Bring those into
Yeah, it's one of the biggest issues. So we always talk about the 5 M's of a regenerative transition. The first one is mindset, but it's really difficult to break that mindset without data, without information. And so, I mean, our farm, for instance, we've slowly turning it into a knowledge sharing, knowledge transfer. We've got 4 PhDs operating on the farm to add the data to this. But actually, there is no, if you manage the transition really carefully, consider it a journey, not a switch that one flicks and suddenly becomes regenerative. That doesn't happen. It takes time, it takes patience. But if you manage that journey carefully, there is no downside financially. There is only upside. And there is no downside to increasing soil carbon. There is no downside to increasing soil life. It all pays you back in better returns, healthier vines, healthier crops. You know, all drink starts in a field somewhere, whether it's a vineyard, an orchard, or a field of wheat. So my really get good advice. Consider it as a journey and take your time. Don't rush it, because if you rush it, you'll fail.
What's the other?
Laura, you got a question?
Yes. Should I go? I think I
Just shout it out.
Yes, I actually object to this anti-sustainability thing, because in our own situation in Argentina, it took us like 4 years to convince many other vintners to join the sustainability program. And when we started hearing about regenerative farming, we basically added a section in the code to do regenerative. And now we have all this research going on. We also have one on biodiversity, which includes genetic diversity in vines. So my question is, because most of the world has formed these sustainability programs, which have been accepted by the monopolies, it's years of work of people learning how to work together. What you described in Alentejo is what happened over about 5 years in Argentina. Why do we need to discard sustainability when it makes sense and you can just add a section to that?
Stephen, go on. Wow, sorry.
I regret picking up the mic now, but it's a very good question. I think we all want to have a world that is sustainable for our children, our children's children, for generations to come. And I actually think that is what we're looking for, and we should respect that word. But it's, if you like, it's an end game, and what we should be judged on is the actions we take now. So that could be reducing bottle weight, as Catena is doing so well. That's one of the.
It's actually through the code for all the wineries in Argentina. So, like, we're actually doing it together.
Well, it needs to be done together, and that's why an event like Sustainability in Drink is so important, to share common practices and take it back to our local regions to develop these ideas. And there's a lot of skepticism around certifications and the next sustainability program, and a lot of people have took years to get onto the organic program. Now they've been told that's not good enough anymore. But I think the whole movement is towards a sustainable world. And from my side, the regenerative movement is actually the mechanism for getting to sustainable in terms of farming. So it's just one of the building blocks towards sustainability. So I'm not an advocate of stop using that word, but we need to find the how-tos so we can get to a sustainable place.
Can I just add some action?
Well, I agree with you and with you.
Sorry.
But I'll explain you why. Because I guess sustainable development is the big umbrella. That's what we all want. And it's not even a destination, it's a road that never ends, because we'll always be having new challenges to add on to the equation. And then obviously we have all of these factors of the equation that we can, work to achieve, to travel that road rather. And it does seem to me, and I'm saying this because we've been having that discussion in Alentejo precisely. But now, and there's actually some producers here that have been talking to me saying, look, there's this certification. We do regenerative, and it's doing really good for us. And we're certified with the sustainability program of Alentejo, third-party certification. But now we were thinking about this regenerative certification. What do you think? And I said, well, obviously it's interesting. If you're interested in it, go for it. But why do you want it? Do you want it because of, market pressure? Is that because forget about consumers? They don't even really understand organic, rather regenerative or sustainable, whatever. So why do you want it? But you're already certified in sustainable production, and you're actually also in organic and this and that. So you just want to put another level of complexity, another label on your already too much polluted back label. of your wine. And so what did we decide to do? Actually, we're actually working on it now. Because we have the regenerative concept totally embedded in our 171 criteria of evaluation. We just don't call it that. Ones are in ecosystems, ones are in soil, one are in plants, one are in pests. It's scattered, but it's all there. So we actually talked with this international certification body that Agri-Regen, something like that. Yet another certification, Regen Agri, exactly. See, I don't even know them by heart yet. And so what we decided to do is, with them, create this verification. So only the certified producers, which in our case, very quickly, we have 700 members, only 24 are certified, because it takes time and it's complicated and it's demanding. So these 24 that actually represent a fourth of the area of the Alentejo are the only ones eligible to eventually apply for this verification. So what this will give is, we'll give them an added value, for example, for the monopolies, on saying, okay, we're sustainably produced, certified, and we have this particular focus on regenerative. And so they can have, this eventually potential added value of the regenerative on top of this far bigger umbrella called sustainable development in production. So that's how we believe can be a kind of an elegant way to marry these two concepts and still respect both as individuals that they are, because they are individuals. Because I believe you can hold the sustainability flag without being regenerative. You can. But the opposite may not be true. And so indeed, it's complex. This is very complex.
You wouldn't be the wine industry if we don't try and make something complicated more complex than it actually is. Alice, do you want to?
Yeah, Alice Lassel's from the Financial Times. And we've heard a lot about the back end of things, but what about the gatekeepers, the retailers? Because I think for a lot of consumers who want to do the right thing, it's very bewildering, it's constantly where to get the information and, what to look for on the label. Can you think of any examples of sort of good practice in this area? Is AI offering a solution maybe for sort of crunching data when you're choosing wines? Also, I write about spirits, though, and meaningful about spirits.
I can start very quickly.
Just to say that our next debate after we're going to be looking at the consumer, who is driving the sustainability. But certainly, if you've got an answer to that question.
I'll give you two examples of what I actually believe as a consumer, because we are also consumers, that it does not, the consumer is, look, usually consumers take 3 seconds to choose what they buy in a shelf. 3 seconds. So either they know what they want, or they just get one based probably on the price. Often, on average. So it may not be necessarily the responsibility of the consumer to choose from a plethora of options, but rather what, for instance, IKEA does, where IKEA committed to have all wood products 100% FSC, Forest Stewardship Council certified. And so a consumer will only buy FSC certified wood. Good. They don't have a choice. It's what you have. The Swedish monopolies and the Scandinavian monopolies do the same. They do the all backdrop work with regards to screening and scrutining and evaluating and witnessing, all the work that a number of sustainability programs allegedly do, and then they screen, and this is good, this is no. And then when they deliver to the consumer in Sweden or in Norway or in Finland or whatever, the consumer just has no other option. It's that. And that has already been screened. And whoever, it's like natural selection, the market or the gatekeepers will naturally select the good ones versus the less good ones. And the less good ones, as nature has been telling us, it's not the smartest or the strongest. It's the most adaptable that will thrive in nature. So this is the same, right? Seems to me.
Tim, the back.
Oh, hi, Richard. Yeah, Tim Wildman. Just to answer Don's question, actually. The question of numbers and dollars and all of this is very important. I'm halfway through doing a series of documentary films for Master of Wine students on sustainability, and like Lara, we decided to defend the word sustainability, so it's going to be another title. But we just come back from visiting 12 wineries around the world, one of which was Gergich in the Napa Valley. And Evo's got the numbers. So they're rock certified. And he was giving us all these numbers for like farming per acre in dollars. His vineyard compared to his neighbours, but like most of his neighbours are Napa. And I said, well, how do you know that? And he said, oh, well, I've got an accountant that does most of their books. And he's told us. So this is basically just what the Evo was telling us a couple of months ago. Cost to farm 1 acre in Napa Valley is $15,000 a year. His vineyards are now 11,000 under regen, plus they're seeing greater longevity, get the old virus-affected vines and everything. So he reckons vineyards could last 3 or 4 times longer. So you add in depreciation, he's estimating, and they're kind of 4 years into regeneratives now, that they could be $7,000 or $8,000 less per acre than their neighbours, so 15% less. So there's some numbers out there that we found, yeah.
So it's those kind of numbers that I was hoping other sectors outside of wine also have, that we can bring to wine. It might be further ahead. Where more trials have been done.
Yeah, well, just to João's point as well, you know, what we certainly learned, because we were in Argentina, we were in California,
Did you go to Alentejo, mate?
But to your point, the message we were getting, particularly in California, was because consumers are staying regenerative on many products in the supermarkets aisle, coffee and chocolate, beef, it's really starting to cut through with consumers and sales.
Good. Thanks, Tim. Good. That's been really interesting. All right. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. No, I mean, nitty-gritty numbers. I mean, that's what everyone says. Isn't it? I mean, like the fact people can quote the fact that bulk wine saves X percent. It's all about that. That's the value, isn't it? People are going to understand numbers rather than necessary theories. Eloise? Yeah, go on, Ed.
Eloise Milburn, calling the drip specialist. I wanted to bring it back to consumers. I think Jabs has said something really interesting about the language that we use when we're talking about sustainability. So why are we not using, living soils rather than regenerative? We're talking about a product that ultimately ends with a consumer. The consumer is so important in this story. So what, in your opinion, is the barrier that makes it so difficult for consumers to understand the sustainability story, and how do you solve that?
So just a quick stat, in this country, 83% of people live in cities and towns. I think a lot of people aren't aware of what's going on in the farms. And so just trying to educate city dwellers, townies like I was, about the complexity of farming is difficult. Even the word regenerative has got, there's agroecology, there's restoration farming, there's holistic farming, permaculture, whatever. There are so many sort of variations on a theme that I think we have to, get behind one single word, but it has so many different meanings. But I think I'm really lobbying to get that word regenerative used, because that's the one that we're going to be putting on labels. But it is all about living soils, and there are different ways of describing it. But that consumer education piece is complicated. And even when we're in the world of regen and we're seeing certifications becoming more and more popular, we've counted there are 10 different certification agencies already for regenerative, 10 already. But to Dom's point, we're at the beginning of a new agricultural revolution. And that's one reason why we set up the Regenerative Viticulture Foundation, is because we want to start getting the evidence together to provide the incentive for farmers to make those changes. So it really is the Wild West right now. But we need evidence base. Ivo's magnificent, and he talks about different advantages as well, about soil temperature and lacking water erosion and soil erosion, rather, compared with his neighbours. But we need to actually get numbers. So I must go and see him again and actually see you and get those numbers again. But it's a complicated question. I think, and for me, the gatekeeper in this world is the retailer. And there's a very interesting article in Forbes recently that talked about the fact that regenerative farming is good for the planet, it's good for the consumer because you're getting a better product, and it's good for the farmer. But who can tell that story the best? And I think it's going to come down to the brands, but also to the retailers, because they're the ones that have the consumer's attention.
Just quickly. So I was once told that the consumer's failure to understand is our failure to communicate. And we need to get better at it, as everybody needs to talk about regenerative, restorative, living soils. Love all those terms, are brilliant, but we need to get better at it. I do my best on my own farm, my own business, but we need to work out how to communicate better.
So we are going to. This is what around the topic what we're going to talk about in the next session. Can I just tell a question at the back there? Then we'll probably break for a break.
Project from the One Direction magazines. I was just wondering if any of you guys started any experience with biochar as a method of.
I've got 50 minutes.
Biochar is great stuff. So the UK government has just announced it's going to spend 22 billion on carbon capture and storage. I can tell you that's a monumental waste of money because we have all the tools at our disposal within natural systems. And biochar is one of those amazing abilities to remove carbon. So if anybody doesn't know what it is, it's effectively charcoal. So it's basically biomass cooked in the absence of oxygen. What it does, it turns woody biomass into carbon, almost pure carbon. That carbon is then generally used to put into soils, and there are some amazing stats around which I can share with you about the benefits of biochar. Principally, it's a very good way to store carbon in the soil. It's a very good way to improve soil fertility. But crucially, in dry areas, there's some great papers from Italy where biochar has been used in vineyards that have increased yields in drought events by 40%. So that's building climate resilience into vineyards through the use of biochar. We recommend using biochar all the time. One of my PhDs at home, not my PhD, someone who's a lot cleverer than I, is focusing on biochar use in a number of different scenarios.
Okay, so I'm under strict instructions here by our timetable. So I think it's 4:21. We've got so we're going to break for 10 minutes.